was just talking with a couple of folk before the service began, and we agreed that the build-up to Christmas takes such a long time, and then somehow it seems all to be over in a flash. There are sad-looking Christmas trees already propped up next to the wheelie bins. Decorations are away for another year. Not here, I'm glad to say, but they soon will be. And if you've been really diligent, you may even have eaten up all the turkey by now. But today we have one more story, traditionally associated with Christmas, one more story to hear. It is the story which marks the transition from Christmas into the beginning of the season that the church calls Epiphany. It is, of course, the story of the Magi. As we hear our readings this morning, listen out for the images in both readings, particularly for what Matthew, who gives us the story of the Magi, draws from the prophecy of Isaiah, which we'll hear first. Matthew takes up a lot of the images that Isaiah offers, but significantly not all of them. And we'll explore some of the possible reasons for this in the sermon. When I was about 10, my favourite shelf in the children's section of the Leith Public Library was the shelf of books on ancient legends. Maybe I was a strange child, but the number who read Harry Potter, I don't think it's all that different. I liked the legends about Greek gods, and their heroes, people like, well, gods, I suppose, like Zeus and Athene, Apollo and Heracles. I particularly liked the Norse legends about Odin and Freya and Thor and all sorts of others. I think I probably read all the books on that shelf, and I certainly read one which included legends from the Middle East. And from that book, one story sticks in my mind. A legend of a great flood, and how a wise and good man survived it with his family in a great big boat, accompanied by every kind of animal. Reading that story had a profound effect on me. I could see that it was the same story as Noah, but with different names. I learnt from it that the stories in the Bible are not necessarily unique. It made me ask if in one culture a story would be considered a legend, how in another could it be true? It took me rather longer to understand that there could be truth in legends as well as in facts. What is shared across cultures and religions can often be surprising and illuminating. Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest religions still in existence. There may be fewer than 200,000 Zoroastrians currently living, most of them in Iran and in India. But before Islam, Zoroastrianism was the official religion of the Persian Empire and would have been followed by many millions of people. Zoroastrians, I should say, believe in one God who created the universe. They believe that the universe and all that's in it is locked into a battle between good and evil, but that good will ultimately prevail. They believe that the one God will send a messianic figure to save the world, that Zoroastrians face judgment after death, that they have free will in life to choose their actions in this world, that there is both heaven and hell as alternative post-death destinations. The purpose of life for Zoroastrians is to be among those who renew the world through good thoughts, good works, and good words and good deeds, and to help the world progress towards perfection. Zoroastrianism was founded by Zoroaster, who came to be recognized as a prophet by his followers. They believe he was miraculously conceived in the womb of a 15-year-old virgin, and that he started his ministry at the age of 30, receiving a vision after having immersed himself in a river. He predicted that other virgins would also conceive, and so other divinely appointed prophets would be born. Signs of these miraculous births would be seen in the stars. A lot of this may be sounding strangely familiar, perhaps uncomfortably so. What does it mean if stories we think of as uniquely Christian can, in slightly different versions, be found in other religions? Does that make Christianity less special? Might we conclude that it is somehow just a copy of another religion? Does it somehow make it less true? Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. Zoroaster, for all his supposedly miraculous conception, didn't emerge from nowhere, theologically speaking. His ideas grew out of historical Vedic religion, practiced in the Bronze Age across what is now Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. In a way, he was a reformer. And in some ways, we may see a parallel in that with Jesus, whose teaching was rooted in and developed from his Jewish identity. And later, of course, the prophet Muhammad drew on both Christianity and Judaism as he developed Islam. And there are lots of surahs in the Quran which are basically direct copies of verses, particularly from the Old Testament. And what this indicates to me is that people everywhere and in all times have wrestled with the same profound questions. Questions such as, why does the universe exist? What is good and what is evil? What is the purpose of human life? And in wrestling with these questions, different, deeply spiritual people have come up with often surprisingly similar answers. Answers expressed in stories which can be told and retold in community. For my little foray into comparative religion this morning, I didn't pick Zoroastrianism at random. Most of us will probably, over the last few weeks, have received more than one card with a picture on it of three men, maybe riding camels, almost certainly wearing crowns, and usually carrying a gift each. Inevitably, in the picture, they'll be heading towards a star. With the exception of the star, this is an image which certainly owes more to Isaiah than it does to Matthew. Nowhere does Matthew say they were men. Nowhere does Matthew say there were 3 of them. Nowhere does Matthew say they were kings. I think that's the bit that particularly comes from Isaiah. It would have been nice, of course, if he'd said that they were kings, because then preachers could have said that Jesus' birth was greeted alike by rich and powerful kings and by poor, lowly shepherds. Therefore, Jesus is for everyone. Sermon done. But that would have required Matthew and Luke to be working in cooperation with each other, sitting down and agreeing, well, you do a story about shepherds, I'll do one about kings, and that will cover it. But it didn't work like that. The word that Matthew used to describe the visitors that he told of seeking out Jesus is magi. And that's a Greek word. Remember, he was writing in Greek. And it's a Greek word which means a follower of Zoroaster. Knowing that unlocks a whole new meaning to this well-known but mysterious story. For a start, here are people who are looking for a new prophet. That's part of their religion. They're expecting a virgin birth announced by a star. That's something from their religious tradition. Matthew's message is therefore that Jesus was the expected king not only of the Jews, but of Gentiles too. And I think that's a rather more radical and important indication of the universal nature of Christ than you can derive from the rather more class-based kings and shepherds contrast. In quite a surprising way, Matthew is saying that Jesus transcends traditional religious boundaries. But his story also highlights a dichotomy. And to appreciate that, we need look no further than the difference between the Magi and Herod. On the one hand, we see non-Jews, followers of another religion, earnestly seeking for the truth, finding it in a stable in Bethlehem, and bowing down and worshipping the infant king. On the other, we see Herod, then the current bearer of the secular title, King of the Jews, plotting to kill the true King of the Jews. Matthew here is setting up one of the overarching themes of his gospel, namely that throughout his life, Jesus was rejected and oppressed by the Jewish leaders, from Herod to Caiaphas, while Gentiles, starting with the Magi, accepted him. And then, of course, Matthew goes on to say how Jesus found refuge as a child in Egypt. And then, as the story unfolds of Jesus' ministry, we encounter, among others, the demon-possessed man in the region of the Gadarenes, where they kept pigs, hardly a particularly Jewish activity. Then there's the Canaanite woman who implored Jesus to heal her daughter. And finally, the centurion at the cross, who exclaimed as Jesus died, "Surely he was the Son of God." And alongside these stories, there are many told of ordinary Jewish people accepting Jesus too. But Matthew is signaling from the outset, really right close to the beginning of his gospel, that there are powerful forces who from the beginning wanted to destroy Jesus. And Herod is the first would-be destroyer. He knew of the expectation that the Messiah would come from the Davidic line, be born in Bethlehem. And he knew that he himself was not of that line, that he only held power because he was propped up as a client king of Rome, useful to the Romans. So he was paranoid about a rival. Matthew is showing us that Herod is a false king on so many levels, but that Jesus is the true king. And the gifts, especially the gold, emphasize that point, while the frankincense denotes priestly status and the myrrh speaks of the significance of Jesus' death. The question that Matthew sets up is this: to whom do we give our allegiance? To those who wield power now, who wield the power of death, or to him who has the power to save? And to help us answer this, Matthew tells a story of followers of another religion from a faraway place making their choice at considerable personal risk. I think his message is this: if you are seeking the truth, if you wish to follow the light rather than live in darkness, if you long for salvation, if you want good, not evil, if love is your guide in life, not hate, and if hope is your inspiration, not fear, then whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever physical or spiritual route you take, you will find truth and light and goodness and salvation and hope and love in the infant King, Jesus Christ. Amen.